Real stories of rising through hardships, raw truths around life and parenting. What does the universe have in store for us? Self-care to your core. We shine best in our authenticity. Welcome to Rise and Shine with the Mama Jac. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Rise and Shine with the Mama Jac. Today, I have a very special guest. His name is Don, and we are going to be talking about pandas, which sounds really cute and fuzzy, right? But we are not talking about those pandas. Hi, Don.
I'm
How are
well, thank you.
you?
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So let's get into it. Tell us your story about the pandas. Like, a lot of people don't know what that is, and you have quite the journey. So let's hear a little bit about it. Let's hear a little bit about
Yeah,
you.
so I am a husband of 21 years as of a couple weeks ago. I have a, thank you very
Congratulations.
much. I have a 19-year-old son who's doing his sophomore year at Florida State, living his best life. And then I have a 14-year-old who is now a freshman in high school. Yeah, so
Nice.
we've got a great family. We've always had a good family dynamic. Everybody kind of had their thing in 2020. Ours started a little bit before COVID. And believe it or not, it started with something as simple as strep throat. And what happened was, my son was sick, probably my younger son was sick for probably the first time in his life. And it was that same strep throat that probably you're familiar with, sore throat, you feel like the
Yeah.
flu. After 5 days, maybe it goes away. Maybe the doctor, prescribes something for you to help speed it along. But when you get that
Hmm.
infection, the body's natural response is to release white blood cells, and then the white blood cells go attack the bacteria, and then hopefully you feel better in a few days. For some people, children, the white blood cells don't disengage after the infection is gone. And as a result, instead of turning on bad cells, they turn on healthy cells. And it ends up attacking the brain and causing brain inflammation. And unfortunately, that's kind of how we got introduced to PANDAS, which stands for Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorder Associated with Streptococcus. That's why they call it PANDAS.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
what happened
Yeah.
is, he was sick, and then a couple weeks later, he got better, and we started to notice defiance, and that was something we really hadn't seen with him before. And as a
And what
he was
age was
9 at
he
the time,
at this
9 years
time?
old.
Okay.
So it was
Mhm.
something as simple as, hey, come to dinner, and it would be met with a really loud no. Or, hey, time to do homework, and it would kind of lead to pounding his fist on the desktop, or just a little bit of defiance. It wasn't enough where we were super alarmed, but we noticed a big change. As the weeks
Mhm.
went on, that defiance turned to almost rage when he was told no. And that would mean kicking a hole in a door or throwing a glass up against the
Dang.
wall. And that was the first time we started
Oh.
to notice that he's making fist as he's starting to yell back at myself or my wife, and we knew something was terribly wrong at this point.
Seeing your baby go from, like, being their normal self to doing all those things, that must have been really hard for you and your wife to watch because it's like, where is it coming from? And you're about to tell us next. But, yeah, I just wanna give you some grace for dealing with that because that's scary. That's really scary. And especially at that age, it's like they're acting one way, and we know that age isn't an age where stuff flips like this. You know what I mean? That's like kind of smooth sailing until you hit the puberty age, normally is where you expect to start to see big emotions like that. But yeah, so what happened after you saw his, change in personality? Where did you decide to start
Well, like most
investigating?
people, we started with his pediatrician, and the pediatrician,
Mm.
oddly enough, just kind of wrote it off as, hey, it's growing pains. I don't see anything wrong with him. He didn't show any, his tests were normal, but he really just kind of gave him a glance and, asked him a few questions, but that was about it. And then every
Yeah.
week after that, something else got worse. We'd started to notice change in handwriting where it was actually regressing, going from pretty good
Oh,
penmanship to
wow.
scribbling. We started to notice curse
Mhm.
words for the first time. So, from that point,
Mm.
we started maybe talking to a psychologist And then we'd start talking to psychiatry. And we honestly went through 13 different specialists during this entire period. Some of them gave diagnosis, but it was something psychiatric, or some of them did say puberty. Hey, he's just going through early puberty at
Yeah.
9. And, we wanted to accept all these things, but we just couldn't get past the fact that it just turned overnight after he was sick that one time.
Yeah.
So after about a year of it, it was my wife that started to really kind of dig in and do research. She was top of her class in biology at the University of Kansas and super smart when it came to that. I was the one that's a little bit more trusting of the doctors. And, after a year, I too was getting frustrated. So she really started digging in on research. She found the Neuroimmune Foundation, where there were specialties that were dealing with autoimmune things like this. And then we found support groups on social media. There were several of them. One in particular, she really started to befriend a lot of all these other parents that were going through this. And what was
Mhm.
the unique thing that we found was, not only are there a lot of people going through this, but they all felt that they were alone because they too were kind of going through that same thing. And it turns out it's actually
Yeah.
very common. 1 in 200 kids is affected with pandas, but nobody knows about it.
Dang. That should be, like, common knowledge for you to check, because strep is a very normal thing to get. Like, super I can't tell you how many times I was the strep throat kid. Like, if somebody from across the room had it, I was getting it. You know what I mean? Like, I was that, like, my body just wanted that strep for some reason. So, oh, that's so
What's funny
interesting.
is strep is actually
Okay, so
diagnosed about 3 million times in the United States every year. Yet our
oh
pediatrician
my
had never heard of
gosh.
pandas. So there's definitely something from an
That
education standpoint we have to do better. I wasn't the
mhm.
science person. Luckily,
Yeah.
my bright wife was able to kind of peel this back and start challenging physicians. We still weren't
Mhm.
getting treatment for it, and people were starting to say, yeah, it could be. But for the most part, doctors were telling us to just stay in our lane, stop being Google parents,
Oh,
stop
Jesus.
educating yourself. And had my wife not have done that, I really don't know where he'd been right now, because one of the psychiatrists said you
Yeah.
better prepare for inpatient living moving forward. And that's where it kind of crashed down. There was one night where we short sightedly went to a neighbor's house for a barbecue. We came back home about an hour later. The sun was still up. We could barely open the door, and we noticed the couch had been pushed up against the door. As I shoved it open a little harder, we noticed broken glass everywhere. There were
Oh
knives
my
in the wall.
god.
There was everything in the refrigerator had been thrown out. Honestly, anything that was broken on the first floor was broken. And, we rushed to his room first because we're thinking we walked upon a murder scene.
Mhm.
He wasn't in there. So we really started to panic. We ran out to the back lanai and he was sound asleep. And I woke him up and I said, well, what happened? And he said he couldn't find anything to eat. So it was at that point that we went to the hospital, even though the ER made us feel guilty going to the hospital for what they were calling a psychiatric issue during COVID. We had nowhere else to go.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
they were about to release us. My wife started pushing back and saying, hey, what do you guys know about pandas? And everybody had heard of it and they were looking at each other, but for some reason it was kind of an unspoken, oh, we don't treat pandas here. And luckily, we had
Yeah.
a neurologist that saw the symptoms. He got his first treatment of what's called IVIG. It's an immunoglobulin treatment that resets kind of the autoimmune system. And it's very
Mhm.
expensive. And you do have to be, for the amount he was getting, he had to stay in the hospital. But overnight, his symptoms went away.
Oh my god. And how long had it been since the beginning of when you noticed until that
two
moment right
years,
there?
2 full
Oh my
years of just
gosh.
no answers. And, our biggest fear, we didn't it was tough on as parents, and it was certainly tough on his older sibling because we kind of pushed him to the side as
Mhm.
we tried to figure this out. But I can't imagine what was going through the younger one's head as he was battling this.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So it's all so you said inflammation in the brain. So whenever he gets the IVs, is that what it helps with? Is that like kind of what keeps it at bay? It like helps with that inflammation, or is and this is something he's going to have forever,
It
right?
is, and it's always going to be a challenge because every time that we switch insurers or my company switches insurers, because it is a pricey therapy, we have to jump through all kinds of hoops until we finally get the approvals, and we will for the rest of our lives. But to be honest, I don't know if he will have to have it. There's different studies showing whatever, but we do notice a time when he's on it and that he thrives. And we do notice a time when
Mhm,
he does have some setbacks, but it's been nothing like it was during those 2 years. He's, for the most part, a very
mhm,
bright, funny, intelligent
mhm.
kid that, he's got friends and he's probably in there right now coding some kind of super code that's going to save the world. And he's just a different kid, just a different everyday kid. And,
Yeah,
I am kind of fearful what will happen down the road with IVIG, but now that more awareness is being brought to this, and to be honest, this is going to be our kind of thing moving forward. We want to make sure everybody knows what this is. And every time I talk about
yeah,
this, whether through the book or with a neighbor or teachers or whoever, everybody knows somebody else that they think is suffering from this. And if we could help
mhm.
just one of those kids, which we already have, we're just going to keep doing this until everybody knows about it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness. I just, like, how does he feel about it? Have you talked to him about it? Like, he remembers doing these things, then it changed. Did he describe it in any way to you or your wife, how he feels after starting all the treatments and what it was like going through all that rage before? He probably couldn't understand it. Was it a blackout type situation where his brain would just completely black out and he would rage out and kind of not remember? Or was this something actively, like, almost not planned, but, like, he knew exactly what he was doing at
It's
the
more of a
time?
blackout. Now he's a little bit more
Mhm,
a reserved person anyway. He's a reserved personality. So
mhm.
that was also part of the challenge of him not being able to really describe what was going on. He was just angry, right?
Yeah.
So, I think we kind of give it to him in phases. I think, we still have him talk to somebody else. He's very secretive about kind of what he does. So to be honest, I don't know if he remembers or not, but we do talk about,
Yeah.
okay, it's important for you to express how you're feeling. It's important for you to tell us if you don't feel well. It's important if you have any kind of weird thoughts or anything, whether it's us or your brother or really anybody if you're by yourself, because I think that's the most important part. If he can express that, hey, something's not right, I'm not feeling well, then we will feel more
Mhm.
confident later in life when he's on his own or he's at college and doing all that, being able to manage this on his own.
Yeah. And will he have to have those treatments for the rest of his life? Or you said there's hope that they think it might you might be able to stop them at some point, right? But there's probably not, so is there a lot of research
Oddly
on
enough,
this?
there is.
Like,
So insurers,
okay.
naturally, they're going to say this is experimental and investigational. But if you go on the
Mhm,
Neuroimmune Foundation's website, there are tons of studies showing that it helps with pandas. And they may call it autoimmune
mhm.
encephalitis or some other medical condition, but the fact is it's brain swelling. That's what's causing all of this.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of literature. That's why we also want to help other people because insurers always say no first, just like they do if it's anything that you want. So we want to be able to at least give them
Mhm.
the tools, where to turn, how to find this information so they don't have to go through that same 2 year battle that we did.
Now, have you found parents that have gone through the same thing as kind of a support? Is there any support out there for people that are going through this, even if it's just like a Facebook group? Is there anything that if somebody listening is like, dang, this makes sense for my kid, that they can go to and ask the questions to people that have actually gone through
Yes.
this?
So PANDAS Parents is what it's
Mhm,
called. It's a support group on Facebook.
mhm,
It is a private group that, they'll ask if you have a kid that has symptoms because they don't want it open
mhm.
like that. But what you'll find is there's
Yeah.
so many stories that have a common denominator, whether it's OCD or
Mhm,
rage or something that fits the profile. And even now, we've been probably we're a couple years away from the really thick of it when we were in it. But when I read posts of a
mhm.
parent that's suffering it now, it brings me right back to what we were going through. There's a lot
Yeah.
of people out there that are afraid right now that just need answers. And this is a great support group for it. I also reach out to, I want teachers to feel free to, if they see something like this in their classroom, to go ahead and tell the parents. And if the parents don't have an answer, then maybe this is somewhere they turn. My job's not to diagnose. My
Mhm.
job's just to report the weather. And there's options out there that I just want to be able to tell people about to help them.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of kids get diagnosed with other things instead of what's actually happening because you're right. I know as a parent, my child has a rare genetic condition. Luckily, we had a doctor that really pushed for it. But when it comes to insurance, they don't really
Not at
care,
all.
do they? They don't really care. They're like, no, like, we're going to do this. And you're like, dang, like, this kid, like, it's as simple as like most insurances only give 30 speech therapies a year, right? Well, if your kid needs speech therapy, normally it's at least once a week. So that right there is like you're praying that 6 times is a holiday or like, you just call out. But also they go multiple times a week. So I could imagine with something like this, it probably wasn't just the IV, right? He was probably still seeing a psychologist and all of that stuff just to keep on track and to kind of measure where he was at in his own head. Is that
It was, and
correct?
he's got a great team even still that we've stepped away from neurology now because he's not showing those symptoms.
Mhm.
His main doctor
Oh,
is a
good.
functional pediatrician, so it's not just someone that does
Mhm.
what the insurers tell you have to do, but they'll do those blood tests
Yeah.
that go outside the
Mhm.
box. They'll go out, they ask more questions that are a little bit more deep rooted. He's got a wonderful immunologist, and there's allergy and
Mhm.
immunology. There's some that focus on the allergy part, and there's some that really take a deep look at what's going on with the autoimmune system in the body. And we found an excellent one.
Mhm.
So he's been very supportive of
Nice.
that too. And then his psychiatrist that we found that first time he went to the hospital has stayed with him. And it's funny. It's one of those hospitals that we don't know if pandas is what we should call it. Let's call it somewhere else. And even he, in the back of his mind,
Yeah.
wants to say it, but he doesn't. And I just think it's
Mhm.
probably because of the cost of the treatment and things like that. But just diagnosing it's half of it.
Yeah.
There, you don't have to treat it with the expensive route we go. There might be something easier than that, but a multi-specialty
Mhm.
approach is definitely needed in this.
Yeah. Yeah, I could imagine. And like I said, I know that feeling of not knowing the future, right? My child is very young, but still, all you can do is hope, right? And just if you pray, pray. Whoever you're talking to, talk to them. Like, let's let's fix this or not even fix it. Let's control this. It's so hard to not have that control and not understand exactly where they're going to be in that many years. And if they're going to have even the bandwidth to understand like I need help right now because those years are very interesting, I feel like, right? High school into college years, it's like you're very overwhelmed with life in itself, meaning just school and what's going on and friends and like all of that, that sometimes, even people without a diagnosis at all fall into some stuff. So I don't mean to like make you more paranoid, but I'm just trying to say like I understand as a parent that like has this thing that you're not quite sure where it's going to go, how stressful that can be. And it's so important to have a support group on that because I'm sure with you, even still today, he's doing great, you said, right? But there's probably still days where you're up and down. And it's, it's it's just when it's nobody prepares you for this, right? You get prepared for, oh, it's a kid. They're going to go through this. They're going to go through that. But then you get tossed into the situation where your kid is, I don't want to say it, but different. And I use those quotes because they're still a kid. They're still a normal kid, but there's something added. And you never expect that as a parent, right? You never expect to have to go through anything like this. So I definitely want to, first of all, say claps for your wife
That's
because, yes, good
Yep.
job, mama. Good job advocating for your baby. and claps for you too, because you both have made it through so far, and your son, because I know it had to have been so confusing being that age and going through that because you don't really understand. Now that you said he's 14, I mean, he understands more probably, but it's still not at that age where I feel like you can completely put the puzzle together in your head. You know what I mean? So I'm glad that you guys have all of this support for him, and you continue to tell him that you are there when you're ready to talk. You don't have to, but when you're ready, we are open and we are not judging. We just want to know because
Yeah.
we love you and we're here to help. It's so important. And I'd hate to say it, like, a lot of parents get tied up in work and tied up in other situations and they're not paying attention to stuff like this. And then it escalates into something that you can't control as easily anymore, or you can't help. I don't want to say control. I hate the word control because we can't control anything in life, right? Nothing. But it just becomes something that is harder to help. And I I'm so sorry that you've gone through this, but I congratulate you on finding the help as soon as you could and for advocating for him and going against that, because doctors don't always want to see that. I don't know what it is. It's like, do they not want to deal with it? Or is it like taboo? So they're afraid to say, oh, we have this patient and they have pandas. And then it's like, is pandas kind of like a taboo thing right now? I remember even when like autism diagnoses started, it was like kind of taboo, right? Because I grew up, autism didn't really exist. I was born in 85. And a lot of people that I grew up with now know that they're on the spectrum, right? Because we're all adults now and we're able to go get that help for ourselves. We see the dots connecting and we're like, oh, maybe we should talk to somebody and be able to have a happier life.
I think,
It's real.
it's a lot of it is habit, a lot of it is insurance. And physicians know
Mhm.
that you probably have to put up a fight, and maybe they don't have the staff to sit on the phone for hours to get
Mhm.
something approved. It's very easy
Mhm.
to give somebody a pill if they show those kinds of symptoms, thinking that that's going to make it go away. Putting
Mhm.
um, a adult level neuropsychiatric drug into a child that doesn't have a neuropsychiatric problem but an autoimmune issue just made things worse. And that's why I'm saying we have to educate starting at the pediatric level. There are all kinds of tools out there. That's just kind of why we decided to do this. That's why we decided to write a book. That's why we decided to go open with it out on Facebook. We're not afraid to talk about it because if people don't talk about it, there's never going to be a common conversation about it.
Is there so you was it you and your wife wrote a
So I
book?
wrote a book called Navigating Pandas.
Okay,
Yeah,
nice.
just a
Okay.
self-published Amazon. I was voted probably least
Mhm.
likely to read a book in high school, but I wrote it, and I wrote it because that was my form of self-care. I tend to hold things
Yeah.
in, and I just let it build up. And it was just once I started writing, it just came out. And the
Mhm.
people that have read it that have kids in similar situations, they feel like I wrote for them. It was their same story that just kind of came out. So I love it. I love being able to help people with it. I don't know if I'll be a one and done when it comes to writing, but if that one helps change somebody else's life, then my mission was accomplished on that.
It probably already has. And we're gonna put the link in the bio of this, absolutely, so people can refer back
Awesome.
to it. Amazon link, if you have a website, everything's
Awesome.
gonna go in there. Everything you want me to put in there is going to go into that description. So people will be able to find your book, they'll be able to find you. Is there any kind of nonprofits or anything like that out there for pandas, like a research thing that people can even donate to help maybe even fund people that can't afford the treatments?
Yeah, the Neuroimmune Foundation is probably the largest foundation
Mhm.
for autoimmunities. It's for adults and for kids, so it's not just specific to
Mhm.
pandas. So it might include Lyme disease or Bartonella or something like that. And then the Pandas Network is a network just for pandas, and they're doing all types
Mhm.
of legislation changes. They're already in front of the governor of the state of California to get pandas approved in that state. I believe there's 7 states where it's
Nice.
approved right now. Still working on it in Florida. We're making the push for it, but eventually it will be in all 50 states, and we will be able to rest and make sure everybody's treated for this.
No, I love that. I love that. And I love all of the support that you give everybody around you as well, because it is navigating something like that when your child changes so much
Yeah.
is hard. It's hard. I have friends that have gone through similar things. You are not the first person that has said pandas, and I don't want to say I had heard of it before, but I feel like, so I was on a mother's app. I'm not on it so much anymore. I think somebody on there was talking about it as well. I had heard the term before, but I wasn't familiar with exactly where it came from and what it was, right? And yeah, so I hope people can listen to what you had to say and what you have to say and think a little more into things. Like it might not just be ADHD. It might not just be, bipolar at, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. It might be something else. And they might not have to be drugged to help this. And I mean, like I said, coming from the generation I was at, everybody was on
Okay.
Ritalin. I don't know if you
Oh,
remember that. Everybody was on Ritalin. And these are the kids that had ADHD, probably autism, because this whole spectrum of autism is different. And it's like really sad to think about it, right? That something people are wrongly diagnosed every day. But that parental intuition, you need to listen
yep.
to it. When you feel like stuff isn't right and that doesn't sit, there's normally a reason for
You
that.
will.
Is there anything else that you would like to tell the community of parents? Maybe somebody not understanding what their child is going through? Any advice you would give? Anything to not ignore? Definitely don't ignore this if it's happening. So you said it happened all
Mhm.
of a sudden. So that's number one. If there's a sudden
Yep.
change,
Yes.
right? So what now, after you went through this journey of all of these doctors and everything, what would be your advice to a parent that thinks this might be a possibility for their kid? Where do they
Okay. So, yeah, the biggest thing is onset of symptoms. If it happens after a sickness like strep throat, if it happens after, I mean, that's probably the biggest thing for pandas. If all of a sudden you notice the change of
Mhm,
symptoms, another one of the common things
mhm,
is OCD immediately afterwards. So we started with rage, but OCD is a very common one. And it could be everything from the cleanliness one to, in our case, we developed wanting to eat food all the time. You just couldn't get hungry enough
mhm.
to the point where we almost had to lock up our food. So if it happens really quick, do that. Number one, there is help out there. So use your social media, use the internet. You are going to be your biggest advocate. And the only thing I can say is you are not alone. There are other parents, there are other kids that are going through this, and there's help out there. You just got to reach out for it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this and bringing this awareness. It's something so simple that people just wouldn't even think about, honestly. And just to have those connections, I feel like a lot of parents are going to be like, after listening to this, because like I said, that quickness, something changed, almost like a trauma happened, right? And all of a sudden, boom, they've shifted. Um, which, yeah, I mean, I'm sure your son is going through a lot of that too, because I can't imagine. I went through a time where I had rage because of my postpartum depression, and the guilt I felt after that was absolutely absurd. So I don't know, because he was so young, if he would have the capacity to go through those emotions at his age, but I'm just sending up love, healing, everything for your son and for your family, and love to you and your wife and your other son for just being there for him and not giving up and not just locking him up, because a lot of parents would have just done that simply because that's what the doctors told them, and you want to trust your doctors. And it's not that I don't trust doctors, but I trust parental intuition way more.
Yeah. Moving forward,
So,
that's all we'll
thank
trust.
you.
And then we'll ask for, yeah,
Right?
just gotta do it.
Right? When you go through something like this, you realize real quick how powerful you actually are inside and what you can realize that other people can't, and that you know your kids best. So thank you so much for sharing. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about
No, I
today?
appreciate you having me on. I really enjoyed it. And thank you for letting us get the word out.
Of course. Thank you so much. It was my pleasure. Thank you for listening to another episode of Rise and Shine with the Mama Jac, where we deep dive into the real, raw, truthful world of parenthood, mental health, wellness, and spirituality. Remember, my loves, it's okay to take a moment for yourself, to breathe, to laugh, and embrace the beautiful messiness of life. Let's keep rising out of our shadows, shining our light, nurturing our souls, and spread love like confetti. Until next time, stay shamelessly authentic. Love, the Mama Jac. For more info and socials, go to shamelesslyauthenticproductions.com.